Look around you. Do you ever feel as if the world has gone mad? As if reason has been abandoned, truth buried, and noise crowned as wisdom? George Orwell warned us long ago that mass psychosis was not a distant nightmare, but an ever-present threat. A disease of the mind, spreading not through bodies, but through crowds. And today, you can feel it everywhere. People no longer think. They repeat. They no longer question. They obey. They no longer see. They follow the herd, blind and unshakable. This is the chilling reality of mass psychosis. And if you are intelligent, you have felt it. You've looked around and wondered how so many can embrace obvious lies, defend absurd positions, and treat stupidity as virtue. You felt the suffocating pressure to conform, to stay silent when lies dominate, to join in the madness just to avoid being the one sane voice in the room. Orwell warned that in times of universal deceit, telling the truth becomes a revolutionary act, and you, too, have felt the weight of that revolution pressing on your chest. The problem is not that stupidity exists, it always has. The problem is that in times of mass psychosis, stupidity becomes contagious. It spreads like fire. One person's blindness infects another. Soon, entire crowds collapse into irrationality, and when enough collapse, society itself shifts. Lies become law, noise becomes gospel, stupidity becomes strength, and truth becomes dangerous. You have felt this danger. You have swallowed your words because you knew speaking them would bring punishment. You have hidden your thoughts because you feared the reaction. You have played along with the madness to avoid being marked as the enemy, and afterward you felt empty. You felt like you betrayed yourself. Because in mass psychosis, survival often demands silence. But silence has a cost. It robs you of authenticity. It chains your mind in the very prison Orwell described. This is the burden intelligent people carry. They see what others do not. They resist what others embrace. And because of this, they are mocked, excluded, or silenced. Orwell himself lived under this shadow, warning against totalitarian illusions, against propaganda, against the terrifying ease with which crowds surrender freedom. His warning was not only political, it was psychological. It was about the mind, your mind, my mind, the collective mind. When the crowd collapses into madness, the individual must fight to remain sane. And here lies the hidden cost. When you live surrounded by mass stupidity, the temptation to join it grows. You tell yourself it is easier. You tell yourself it is harmless. You tell yourself that keeping your head down is the smart move. But Orwell would call this what it truly is: surrender. The moment you conform to madness, you lose your last defense, your ability to see. And once sight is gone, freedom follows. This is why you feel the tension so deeply. You feel torn between two worlds. On one side, the comfort of belonging, the safety of silence, the ease of blending into the herd. On the other, the pain of truth, the isolation of awareness, the burden of seeing clearly in a world that prefers blindness. The problem is not just external, it is internal. It is the war between your need for acceptance and your hunger for truth. And in times of mass psychosis, this war is constant. But here is the first lesson Orwell offers. You are not crazy for feeling this way. You are not broken for seeing what others deny. You are not arrogant for resisting stupidity. You are awake in a world that has chosen sleep. And that awakening is both a curse and a crown. A curse because it isolates you. A crown because it frees you. In the next part, we will explore Orwell's revelation. How mass psychosis is manufactured, how propaganda and fear blind the crowd, and how intelligent individuals can resist the collapse. We will uncover why society rewards stupidity, why silence becomes complicity, and why the few who stand apart carry both the heaviest burden and the greatest power. Because in times of madness, clarity is rebellion, and rebellion begins within. Orwell did not simply warn of dictators, he warned of something far more insidious, the invisible machinery that bends minds long before chains are placed on bodies. Mass psychosis does not begin with prisons. It begins with propaganda. It begins when people no longer question the stories they are told, when they accept the narrative of the crowd as absolute truth. And when this happens, truth itself becomes negotiable, malleable, fragile. Propaganda is not just lies. It is repetition until lies feel like truth. It is exaggeration until illusions feel more real than reality. It is silence about certain facts until those facts disappear from memory. Orwell captured this in his haunting phrase, "Who controls the past controls the future. Who controls the present controls the past." Think of what that means. If those in power decide which truths are repeated and which truths are buried, they are not just shaping opinions. They are shaping reality itself. In times of mass psychosis, people surrender willingly. They abandon their critical thought because it is easier to conform than to resist. They echo what they are told because resisting feels dangerous. They align themselves with the crowd because being alone terrifies them more than being wrong. And so the collapse begins. Minds bend, crowds swell, stupidity spreads like fire. And soon, individuals no longer think at all. They only mimic. Why does this work so well? Fear. Orwell knew that fear is the sharpest weapon of mass control. Fear of punishment, fear of exclusion, fear of being wrong, fear of standing alone. The crowd uses fear as a whip. It tells you, obey or be cast out, agree or be destroyed. And for most people, this fear is stronger than truth. They would rather drown in lies than face the pain of isolation. But for the intelligent, this trade feels unbearable. They see the manipulation. They see the absurdity of what is being demanded. They see the price of obedience, the slow death of the self, and so they hesitate, they resist, they refuse, yet even they are not safe. For the machinery of mass psychosis is relentless. It does not only use fear, it uses repetition, it uses comfort, it uses the subtle poison of constant noise, endless, meaningless chatter, news cycles, gossip, entertainment, distractions. Orwell saw that drowning people in noise was just as effective as silencing them. Because when the mind is overwhelmed, it stops asking questions. It becomes passive. It consumes instead of analyzes. And once the mind is passive, control is complete. Mass psychosis thrives not only on fear but on fatigue. A tired mind is an obedient mind. So what does the individual do? Here is the revelation. Survival in times of mass psychosis requires silence of a different kind. Not the silence of fear, but the silence of clarity, the ability to step away from the noise and reclaim your thoughts. The strength to resist propaganda not by shouting louder, but by refusing to be consumed, to see the machinery and say, "I will not be bent." Orwell insisted that language itself becomes corrupted under mass psychosis. Words lose meaning, freedom becomes slavery, ignorance becomes strength, lies become truth. And once language collapses, thought collapses with it. If you do not have the words to describe reality, you lose the ability to resist. This is why protecting your own clarity of thought is survival. It is not enough to avoid lies. You must also preserve language, preserve meaning, preserve truth within yourself. Ask yourself, how many times have you repeated phrases you did not believe just to avoid conflict? How many times have you stayed silent when you knew words were twisted beyond recognition? Each time you do this, you feel the sting of betrayal, not to others, but to yourself. That sting is the sign that you are still awake. That sting is proof you still see. And that sting is what Orwell would tell you to protect at all costs. Because once the sting is gone, once compliance feels normal, you have already joined the herd. The contrast could not be clearer. The crowd thrives on illusion, while the individual survives on clarity. The crowd thrives on fear, while the individual survives on courage. The crowd thrives on repetition, while the individual survives on silence. The battle is uneven, but it is not hopeless, because the truth has one advantage. It does not need repetition to survive, it needs only recognition. One awakened mind carries more power than 1,000 blind voices. This is why mass psychosis always fears the individual. It fears the solitary thinker who refuses to conform. It fears the one who will not surrender his words, his thoughts, his clarity, because one voice that refuses can expose the lie for what it is. And once exposed, the machinery cracks. This is why Orwell warned that in a world of lies, truth-tellers are hated. But it is also why truth is never destroyed. It may be buried, it may be mocked, but it waits. And it only takes one awakened individual to bring it back to light. In the next part, we will explore the deep mechanics of this collapse. Why stupidity spreads faster than clarity, why social pressure enslaves, and why even the intelligent feel the pull of the herd. We will uncover why resisting the crowd is the most dangerous and most necessary choice you can make. Because in times of mass psychosis, the real question is not how the crowd controls you, but whether you will allow it to. Why does stupidity spread faster than clarity? Orwell saw the answer in the nature of human fear and comfort. Stupidity is simple. It requires no effort, no courage, no sacrifice. It asks nothing of you except to follow. Clarity, however, demands work. It demands thinking, questioning, resisting, and in a world that glorifies ease, most people choose the path of least resistance. They do not want to struggle with truth when lies are more convenient. Mass psychosis feeds on this weakness. It offers safety in numbers. It whispers, "Everyone believes this. Who are you to question it?" And for many, that whisper is enough. The crowd becomes a shield. Belonging feels safer than truth. Conformity feels easier than courage. And so, stupidity spreads, not because it is powerful, but because it is comfortable. But comfort has a hidden cost. The more you conform, the more you surrender. First your voice, then your thoughts, then your freedom. Until eventually, you no longer know where the crowd ends and you begin. Orwell described this as the slow death of individuality, a death so subtle that many never notice it until it is complete. Social pressure is the chain that binds the mind. It does not whip you into obedience, it seduces you. It tells you that silence is wise, that agreement is polite, that resistance is pointless, and little by little, it erodes your will. You laugh at jokes you despise, you echo opinions you reject, you obey rules you know are absurd, and each time the chain grows tighter, until one day you are not wearing the mask. The mask is wearing you. Why is resistance so dangerous? Because truth exposes illusions, and illusions are what hold the crowd together. When you refuse to participate, you reveal the fragility of the lie, and the crowd cannot allow that. It reacts with anger, ridicule, exclusion. It must destroy the one who refuses, because that refusal threatens the entire machinery of madness. This is why Orwell warned that truth-tellers are hated, not because they are wrong, but because they are dangerous. And yet, resistance is necessary. Without resistance, mass psychosis becomes permanent. Without resistance, lies solidify into reality. Without resistance, stupidity becomes law. The individual who resists carries a burden heavier than most can bear, but that burden is also a gift. Because every act of resistance, every refusal, every truth spoken, every silence preserved against propaganda, weakens the machinery of control. It reminds the world that not everyone has surrendered. Think of your own life. How many times have you felt the pull of the crowd? How many times have you silenced your own voice to avoid being the target of ridicule? How many times have you betrayed yourself just to belong? This is the battlefield Orwell described. Not tanks and guns, but conversations and silences. Not prisons and chains, but words and thoughts. And in this battlefield, every choice matters. Stupidity spreads because it is easy. Clarity survives because it is rare. The crowd collapses into madness because it is afraid of solitude. The individual endures because he learns to stand alone. That is the law of mass psychosis. The many surrender to illusions, while the few struggle to preserve reality. And though the struggle is lonely, it is also the seed of freedom. This is why Orwell's warnings remain alive. They are not relics of history. They are mirrors of your present. Each time you feel pressured to conform, each time you are tempted to stay silent, each time you wonder if truth is worth the cost, you are living Orwell's prophecy. And your choice, to obey or to resist, is the choice that defines not only your freedom, but the freedom of all who come after. In the next part, we will reach the climax. We will see how escape is possible, how solitude and awareness transform into weapons of survival, and how practical steps can turn resistance into strength. Because Orwell's warning was never only about despair, it was also about the way out. Because in times of madness, survival does not belong to the crowd. It belongs to the one who refuses to kneel. Orwell's warning was not written to paralyze you with fear. It was written to awaken you, to show you that mass psychosis, no matter how overwhelming, is not invincible. The machinery of lies depends on your obedience. It needs your silence. It needs your surrender. And the moment you withdraw that obedience, the machinery weakens. The first step of escape is awareness. The second is courage. The third is discipline. Awareness means seeing clearly. It means refusing to be lulled by repetition, refusing to be seduced by the comfort of belonging, refusing to call lies by the name of truth. Awareness requires vigilance. It means noticing how language is twisted, how fear is used, how noise is weaponized. Awareness is uncomfortable because it strips away illusions. But only in discomfort do you awaken. Courage is the willingness to endure the cost of awareness. Orwell knew that speaking truth in a world of lies is dangerous, but silence is deadlier. Courage does not always mean shouting in the streets. Sometimes it means a quiet refusal, a decision not to repeat what you know is false, a choice to protect your clarity even when the crowd mocks you. Courage is not loud, it is steady. It is the strength to remain yourself when others abandon themselves. Discipline is the daily practice of resistance. Mass psychosis thrives on distraction. It feeds on fatigue. It wants your mind fragmented, your attention scattered. Discipline means reclaiming your focus, reading instead of scrolling, thinking instead of echoing, choosing silence over noise. Discipline is the armor of the intelligent because it preserves the clarity that propaganda seeks to erode. So how do you put this into practice? Orwell's philosophy, combined with psychological insight, points to concrete steps. 1. Guard your mind like a fortress. Choose carefully what you consume. Not every book, not every article, not every voice deserves entrance into your thoughts. Filter relentlessly. If noise dominates your day, clarity will not survive. 2. Practice solitude as a weapon, not a wound. Solitude is not isolation. It is preparation. It is where you regain strength after being drained by the crowd. It is where you reconnect to your authentic self. Use it to think, to create, to breathe freely again. 3. Protect language. Refuse to echo twisted words. When freedom is called slavery, do not repeat it. When lies are dressed as truth, do not validate them. Orwell knew that controlling language is controlling thought. By preserving clarity in your words, you preserve clarity in your mind. 4. Seek allies, not crowds. Do not waste energy trying to wake the masses. Most will resist clarity, but there are always a few who see as you do. Find them, share strength with them, build connection that deepens, not noise that drains. 5. Confront fear with truth. Fear is the whip of mass psychosis. Each time you choose truth over fear, the whip loses power. The more you practice courage, the weaker the machinery becomes. Fear shrinks when faced directly. This is how you escape, not by running away, but by refusing to kneel, not by silencing yourself, but by protecting your clarity, not by conquering the crowd, but by conquering yourself. And what happens when you do this? You become rare, unshakable, authentic. People begin to notice. They may not always understand, but they sense the difference. You no longer bend with the wind. You no longer drown in the noise. You walk your own path. And in doing so, you light the way for others. Orwell's warning, then, is not only about danger, it is also about hope. Because mass psychosis depends on blindness, and each person who refuses to go blind is a crack in its foundation. One awakened mind is a rebellion. 1,000 awakened minds are a revolution, and revolutions do not begin with crowds. They begin with individuals who choose awareness over comfort. So I leave you with this reflection. You are surrounded by madness, but you do not need to join it. You are surrounded by stupidity, but you do not need to surrender to it. You are surrounded by lies, but you can choose truth. The world may hate you for it, mock you for it, punish you for it, but freedom is never cheap. And authenticity is never free. The price is courage. The reward is your soul. Now it is your turn. Write in the comments, I choose awareness. If you refuse to be blinded by mass psychosis, I protect my mind. If you will not allow noise to steal your clarity, I walk free. If you are ready to escape the madness of the crowd, and subscribe, because here we go beyond the illusions. We dig into truth. We reclaim power. We walk together, not as a herd, but as awakened individuals.